Hello, Votoms fans. Although this is a weird one because it's not really a Votoms. So there was some sort of YouTube original series called Obsolete, and there was only 12 episodes. Sadly, it never went past season one. I guess it came out around 4 years ago. I watched it. It was pretty great. I liked it. The general premise is some aliens were visiting Earth. They never showed up on Earth, though. They just dropped off robots in exchange for some resources, like really common resources. And so then it changed the balance of power in the world because poor people would just leave piles of resources and in exchange they'd get a modern robot, and then they would mechanize, modify them for warfare and stuff like that. So they have all these mechs in this cartoon series, and then we have the model kit here, but it's a crossover with Votoms. So this Votoms robot never showed up in that cartoon, but Votoms is an old Japanese cartoon from like the 70s or 80s or something like that. But it has the mechanics very much like the mechs in this Obsolete YouTube series. Okay, so yeah, Good Smile Company, they're known for like, I think Figma and Nendoroid figures, but they seem to make a few model kits and they're called Moderoid. Okay, so this is 1/35th scale, which is a very common armor scale, like tanks and other military armor. You very often come in 1/35th scale. Okay, yeah, it says collaboration model. Any date? It's weird. They just never. A lot of companies never date their stuff, so you don't have any clue how old it is. Unless it's back here. Well, I don't see it off the initially, so. I think you're actually going to be expected to glue this together, unlike Bandai kits that are all press fit together. Alright, some interesting little shots there. So let's take a look here. I actually bought this probably a year ago, maybe even longer, when I first got into Votoms. It's just I have so many other things to review, and model kits take a lot of time, so that's why I'm only finally getting around to it now. Alright, instruction-wise, we have same art as the box. And okay, now it looks like there's going to be some decals, hopefully. And yeah, those decals are common to Votoms. Well, I'm just looking at it. I think this must have been painted by a professional. You don't see any nub marks, so it does give you some instructions for colors in Japanese, but I don't know what brand. I can't make that out. Alright, so yeah, the instructions are in Japanese, but I find with most model kits you just gotta look at the part number and the arrows, how to put it together. But it is looking like it needs glue. There will be decals hopefully, and there are all the pieces. Should be 4 runners there in the decal sheet. Alright, so that actually doesn't look very difficult at all. The question is, do I paint it? The pieces are small enough that I don't think you're going to have too many wavy lines. There is actually a character as well, so that's cool. This is a dark gray for a missile pod and some of the helmet areas, machine gun, RPG, some accessories. And the main body is like an olive, military green. And now we have another character, so we have 2 characters. Very cool. This one looks like this is a Votoms character. Yeah, that's like a Jericho QB, where the other one is more like probably an obsolete character because they're just normal humans. You can see the male and female are quite different in size. That actually makes sense. Okay, and there's the tiny decal sheet, so I do have everything. So as usual, I'm going to fast forward this to some music, and you can either slow it down or make it even faster, or just skip right to the end, and we'll see if I ran into any problems making this. back here. Did a little bit of a weathering job on it as well. So it's actually quite small. It's a lot smaller than I thought it would be. It's around, going to the top of the helmet or the head, I would say it's around 85 millimeters maybe. Or this rocket pod maybe. Yeah, still like 85 millimeters. It's obviously hard to see. I'm not at home. I don't have my rulers. I don't know. This looks like a freebie. It doesn't even have inches on it. Alright, anyways. Initial impressions is that's actually very small. In fact, it reminds me of the 1/48 scale Votoms. Unfortunately, because I'm not at home, I can't compare to those right now. The build was pretty straightforward. There was one issue though. I guess I'll just talk about it now. It's this whole green chassis here. There's two halves. Above this wheel, there's you can see like right here maybe. I hit focus. There's a seam line right there. So there's two halves, one half, two halves. And when I squeezed them together, because there's nothing in the front, it collapsed inwards. So I ended up gluing on this rear part here, making it all a monocoque. The problem is you're actually supposed to not glue it, and this door is supposed to come on and off. But it's not going to be a really rigid structure if you don't glue this in place. And the reason being is if you want to get the Votoms character in here, you take that door off and then you just slide the whole character inside from the back. But because I glued it shut, I ended up having to trim off a lot of the butt and then the legs, and now I can just get it in here like this. And that's fine for me because I'm just going to leave that guy in there forever. So that's what's going on there. So just be mindful of that. You might ask what this is. You don't even need to actually put on any of the green parts, and you could just have a raw frame all in gray. And this, instead of this green cabin, this little seating thing would go onto the frame, and then this girl is supposed to sit on this and control it that way. I do like how her arms are kind of close to that handle, but obviously I bought a Votoms version of this exo frame thing, so that's what I went with. It's nice that they give you two hands. The two wavy hands are gray, and then the two grip hands are green. And then they actually gave you two extra joints. I want to talk about these because these are really hard to put together. You can see one side has a pin, the other side has a hex hole, and then you notice it like a fake pin here. The reason why they have this is they're having as much plastic grab this side as possible. That's why it's going all the way through. And I do think that's a good design. It's just that it's really hard to actually tighten. That's as far as I can get it with my fingers. Unless you start twisting it, and then you can kind of push it and twist it. Yeah, but it's so small that, anyways, I did do it on all these, on the actual robot, but it's nice that they give you extras. I almost think possibly this peg hole could have been bigger, and then it still would have worked better. It's just that the peg itself is so small. I think you might shear it off if you play with this a lot, even though it's not a round hole, it's a hex hole, so only 6 sides are touching it. I kind of wish that the peg and the hole were bigger. But alright, that's just a nitpick. Basically this, even though you can pose it, I wouldn't recommend posing it a lot. It's going to get a lot looser, and then it'll just become a floppy mess. Alright, so let's just go over the articulation again. You saw me open the hatch here, but it's pretty tight fit there, and I'll open it again. There are some details. You can maybe paint those blue and say they're like screens or something like that. And then you'll see here, this is the shoulders. These things pivot up and down, but there's a roll cage in the way, so it's not going to pivot too much because this armor is in the way. You don't actually have to put this armor on, and then the arms would move a lot more. So if you did want to take it off, you can see I can just rotate it off. Or I should be able to, yeah, there we go. So really everything is a pretty tight friction fit. So now you can see, you know, that arm can move up and down a lot more, right? Quite a bit actually. And then that hinges there as well. And then you have the ball peg thing, so you can rotate that, and obviously flex it in and out. But see, again, I'm worried about shearing off that peg, so you want to probably hold it at the ball. Then maybe it'll loosen up over time, but it's basically a lot of articulation, which is great. But at least until you put on the shoulder pads that the scope dog is supposed to have. And I thought about trimming this off, but no, I think that little rectangle is supposed to be there and it's supposed to stop it against this gray thing. If it wasn't there, hold on, it would just go past it and maybe collide with the other part of the hinge. So I think that's there on purpose. If I could just rotate this on, such a tight fit. See, it's pressing up against that gray surface. And then again, that's a hex hole, so even though it's a tight, pretty tight thing that holds its grip. Look at this. I mean, but I do feel if you play with it a lot, eventually that plastic's gonna get bigger, and then the thing will become floppy again. Okay, so now there's a peg here in the forearm going into the, I guess, bicep. But oddly, that peg doesn't go all the way through like on the other joints. So it will move, of course, but I am a little skeptical again. Okay, then the hands are also on a peg system. The peg is kind of short, but I guess it has to be because the hand is really small. And then obviously you could put on one of the wavy hands if you want, but they're mismatched in color, so that's why I decided to just leave it green, because scope dogs are green in most cases. Alright, yeah, so that's really tight. You want to basically twist it as you put these things together, I think. A few parts were loose though, so I ended up gluing them. Like this, I think if you mess around with it too much, this armor might fall off. I think I actually put some glue in there. This bazooka could come off too, so I glued that in place with just some hobby glue. Okay, now I do think there actually is a joint up there, but I don't think it's really meant to move with this scope dog. I don't think it is, because there's a big peg in this gray frame going into this green body. And that's fine by me. Okay, so that's the arm articulation. This hip here, let me try to twist it out. Or maybe this side would be better because there's no machine gun there. So that again has a hexagonal hole, a relatively short peg, and I can see paint didn't even dry. And so all these ball pegs are the same joints, so you don't need to worry about, what part number goes with what. And then yeah, this one I did eventually get to be fully closed by twisting it as well as pushing it together. And so on the other side there's the same peg going into there, so you could rotate the thigh. Alright, so that goes in there, so obviously you can move the leg all the way back, all the way forward, and then you got the hinge, there you go, and then you can rotate the thigh, and then there's just a peg going in this way here, so the knee, you can bend pretty well actually. I mean, that's it's pretty much collapsing on itself. And then what's getting in the way is this armor flap. This is just a friction fit. These armor flaps, all four of them. So you gotta be really mindful of these joints. See, this one doesn't want to really go in. It's really tight. Okay. I think these are drive wheels, if I recall from that cartoon, and they have funky wheels, a bunch of wheels on this wheel, and this is obviously a hex hole with the peg again. So yeah, you can get this thing pretty low to the ground, I guess, if you wanted to actually move the legs all the way back like this, kind of like the real scope dog would do. Let me see if I can do that. Get the armor plates out of the way. The knees up, and yeah, so it'll just kind of rest there, but yeah, it's kind of weird looking, right? It's kind of a weird looking robot in general. Well, now that fell apart, you can see how short that peg is. I kind of wish they just went through all the way again, so you'd have more peg and have it exposed. I mean, this is an exposed peg, this thing that's painted black. So I wouldn't have had a problem with that going all the way through, because now you see, it's just going to fall apart because the thing is too short. Okay, so then at the bottom of the foot, the front half of the foot has a peg and hole system. And then you can also, there's half of a hinge here that you add. The other half is just part of this whole shin piece. So naturally you can pose that quite well. Yeah, that's really unnatural actually, but I kind of wish the feet were wider. Oh well. So that is it for the oh well, no, this rocket pod here, you can pivot that. That's just a tiny peg. I don't know why they made that peg so small. They could have easily made that huge and made it more durable, but they didn't. Okay, well anyways. So yeah, all in all, I think you can get a lot of great posing out of this thing, but it won't hold that pose if you play with it too much. This drive wheel here, it's supposed to spin. It did spin before I paint washed it. Oh well, it's not spinning anymore. That's fine. Okay, so I guess that's it. It's just a lot of funky details there. It definitely reminds me of a scope dog, but it's obviously not a scope dog with this little crossover that they did here with the Obsolete. It's interesting enough, and also it's not huge, so there's a possibility I might get the other Obsolete models, just because they're in line with, I think, the 48 scale Votoms. But I can't confirm that right now. Eventually I'll have to, whenever I get back home, next time I build another one of these model kits, I'll bring out the Votoms by Takara Actic Gear line. One thing I forgot to show is this peg down here, so you can get a little bit of rotation in the stomach area, but the armor plates, I would say generally, are going to limit your movement, right? Only a few degrees, so it's not a major articulation point. Okay, well the decals worked pretty well. There's no major issues with the decals. Yeah, I suppose it's just some of the pegs are so short that I would recommend just gluing a bunch. I ended up gluing probably half of this together because I don't want the things to fall off and get lost. But I will say that as right out of the box, the joints are really tight, so it's definitely going to hold its pose, so that's pretty impressive. I think it could have been designed a tiny bit better, where maybe some of the pegs went all the way through, like as you saw. But all in all, it's pretty nice, and it's pleasantly small, so it fits really well with my small model collecting. Thank you for watching today. Hopefully we'll see some more of these obsolete figures in the future. Bye.